Hey there, BookTube. Noah.
Hello, but
Everyone who reads it must converse is the channel. Hey, Matthew. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Very cool. Good. Happy Sunday. Sundays with Borges is on. And yes, you might be saying, Yasmin, not near as cute this week. What's going on?
Yeah.
But Yasmin is here. Hey, Yasmin.
Hi. If this is happening, I'm sorry. I don't know what else
Y-
to do to fix it. But if for now it's okay,
Yasmin is having a little bit of connection issues. Sorry to say. Looks like you locked up. I don't know. We'll see if we can get it right. But today we are covering an awesome uh story from the Aleph. This is the first story in the Aleph called The Immortal. And this is like quintessential Borges, you know. He's exploring the things that he loves. Infinity. um Put in the hands of human beings. Like what if we had an infinite amount of time, right?
Yeah, you've got the infinity, you've got the interconnectedness of all literature. Um, you have language. You know, it ends with meditation on language, and
Right. Yeah, it was that thing where, after all said and done, all that's left is words. It's
which
very
goes
cool.
back to yeah. We'll get into it. We'll get into it.
Yeah. Let's start. We'll start at the beginning. And hopefully Yasmin will jump back on. I'll keep an eye. I'll keep an eye out. I told her to restart her phone and then hopefully that will solve any of the kind of issues. Maybe she's been running it down today, popular, right? So it starts off in another kind of quintessential Borges way, where, hey, Yasmin, let's see if we got her back. It starts off in another kind of quintessential Borges way, where where there's a found manuscript, right,
Mm-hmm.
in a copy of the Iliad. Hey, Yasmin, you with us?
Hi, I think so. If this keeps
Sweet.
happening, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to do to fix it. But for now, looks like we're good.
It seems like it's cool for now. That's for sure.
Okay.
All right. Um, So just starting it off, it's a found manuscript. This is one thing that Borges loves to do, right? Give you a manuscript that is not real, but then examine it, do literary criticism on it. Even in this, it's not so much of a critique of it in any kind of way. This manuscript is like found in a copy of the Iliad, and then it is recounted as the story of the immortal. And
Hmm.
at the end there of that first paragraph where it's all that set up is this manuscript is written in an English that teems with Latinisms. This is a verbatim transcription of the document. And then we have part one, part two, part three, part four. So a long document for Borges, 12 pages, right?
Right? Yes,
And
exactly.
it recounts a story kind of in first person, maybe journal entries or something like this, even of a guy that is part of a failed military campaign at first. And they're just kind of stuck, with their tail between their legs, kind of thing. No glory, no honor in it at all, just a total failed campaign. And here's the story of this immortal city, a city at the end of the world. And then instantly there's all this language that kind of throws you to a mythological city, this
Hmm.
kind of hunt for the fountain of youth, and for the city of El Dorado, things like
Hmm.
this.
Yeah.
And so there's this stream that runs by this city, and the stream, the water, is said to give the person who drinks from it immortality. And there's a city that is beyond compare. And so he sets out to find it. Now, it's not just him. He's like part of he's a very respected, even maybe a high level member of this military. And they give him a regiment to go with him.
Mm-hmm.
And they set off for the glory of the empire that they are, conquesting for, or whatever it is. Go
Mm-hmm.
ahead.
Although
You got
it's
something?
yeah, it's maybe worth it's maybe worth pointing out that even as soon as he resolves to go and find this river, I had to laugh when he's just decided to go in search of it, and it says, in Rome I spoke with philosophers who felt that to draw out the span of a man's life was to draw out the agony of his dying and multiply the number of deaths.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So even from the very beginning, the philosophers are telling him not to do it.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, I marked that too. And it reminded me a lot of something in the beginning of Lawn, of the first story in Fictions, how there was that saying that Borges' friend found that mirrors and what else? Fatherhood multiplied men, so they were something horrible. And I guess that immortality would fit into that as well here in the story. So I also thought that was a great line.
Yeah, it is a great line. I marked it as well. It's just one of those things, and that line and the line after it, Borges is succinctly just hitting you right with what you need to understand there. And it's
right.
I'm not certain whether I believed in the city of immortals. I think the task of finding it was enough for me.
Exactly.
And so we are driven to, do something in our lives. We want to accomplish something. We want to do something. Mankind is just kind of driven like that, and we're driven by desires and fulfillment of something, success, whatever that might be, whatever, fill in the blank there.
And we do it despite of the warning saying that it might result in something horrible.
Right. Or have, be careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah.
So
in
when
relation to that second line,
yeah,
that you mentioned there, where he says he's not even sure if he believed in it.
Yeah.
That reminded me of I remember hearing a Borges interview, and he was talking about if he ever were to meet his maker, and if God said to him, "Do you want to know what the meaning of life is?" That he wouldn't want to know, because the puzzle is the interesting part of it. He wouldn't want.
I can definitely see that for sure. There's Borges for you. He loves it. He loves it. That's for sure. So right off the bat in this exploration, they get into these. It says, on its slopes of this mountain grows euphorbia, an antidote to poisons. On its peak live the satyrs, a nation of wild and rustic men given to lasciviousness. That the bosom of those barbaric lands where the earth is the mother of monsters might succor a famous city, such a thing seemed unthinkable to us all. And other than that, there's so much of this like mythology and legendary figures that are even alluded to in this. He's really bringing you into a world of myth and legend, and this kind of thing.
Yeah, the whole thing has a bit of a feel of a Arthurian story.
Yeah.
Knights
he's
of the
going
Round
into
Table,
he's going into uncharted territory. The great unknown, where these monsters are all over the map, That's cool. So they fall on hard times, of course. They fall on hard times. This is a very dangerous undertaking, going into just uncharted lands, peoples that are not known, and mutinies, desertions, mutinies, and then there is a plot to actually kill him. It kind of alludes to him squashing mutinies very heavy-handed, and so he's, you get a sense that he's like a commander. He's not just a regular guy. He's
Mm-hmm.
somebody who is, you know, had a degree of success. He's an ambitious individual, and these kind of things. But with the advent of this kind of plot to kill him and him catching wind of it, he takes a couple of his loyal men. Maybe it's 10 or so, who knows. Takes a group of men with him, and they leave the main company, and they strike out on their own. And soon after that he becomes separated from them. He gets, like, it says really quickly, a Cretan arrow rent my flesh. So maybe there was an altercation or something, or there's bandits. It's dangerous out there. And then he's on his own and can't find water. And very quickly, maybe 3 or 4 lines, he is almost ready to give up, completely ready to give up, finding this city and everything like that. He says, I left my path to the will of my horse. And the horse just keeps walking forward. And that's when he sees this kind of, the distance bristles with pyramids and towers. I dreamed unbearably of a small and orderly labyrinth whose center lay a well. And he's thinking about water. He can't find water. And it falls into dream and maybe nightmare. You don't know with Borges. Right? And there's the end of part 1 there, where it kind of is like another cliche there. It's always darkest before the dawn. And it gets to a very dark place very quickly. I don't know if Yasmin's going to be able to hang. The connection issues are definitely trying with her. So I'm glad you're here. Let's see.
I
Hey,
changed
Yasmin.
rooms.
Good.
Kept trying.
Nice. Get closer to the router or something, right?
I did, yeah.
Cool. So there we go. Part 1. Part 2, he like wakes up, and it says like when he disentangles himself from the last nightmare. So the dream at the last end of the first part is referred to in retrospect as a nightmare. And what has happened? Well, he's bound with his hands behind his back in a crevasse of a mountain, just, like off in a little niche in stone. And he's just there, still thirsty. And he sees, I guess, a stream out in front of him, and falls out of the crevasse, falls, face plants in the water, and just drinks, because he's gonna die if he doesn't drink any water.
Yeah.
Stays there for, falls asleep. He's gone through, hell at this point. And then he kind of comes to, and he sees that there are many people that are living the way that he was, in these little niches in the mountain, hollowed out, maybe even holes in the ground. And they're just there. They're very barbaric. They don't talk. They just look around or look at him. They're not really concerned. It doesn't seem. They're just letting him do his thing. And there is a giant, beautiful, unbelievable city opposite this mountain, and he can see it. So he decides to go to it, of course, right? Is this what he has been searching for? So I love this city. This is a more just quintessential Borges stuff, where he goes into this city and how its layout is, and it is a labyrinth that only Borges could do.
Mm-hmm.
It is totally confusing and
Chaotic.
unbelievable. He
Mm-hmm.
walks around these city walls, and then he gets down into has like a ladder down into an underground, and it turns out to be a maze and a labyrinth under there. And he's going through this labyrinth for what, maybe weeks? You know, it's just like an undeclared amount of time, but he's searching all these different paths, finally finds a way up, the only way up through these 9 different doors and labyrinths and 9 different paths off of a single court, but then leads to courts that look just the same as the first one but are not. And so it just you don't know. Time becomes at that point something that you can't really locate. Did you get that sense as well?
I
In
definitely
that,
did. I definitely
Yeah, well,
did. Yeah.
the first labyrinth that he has to go through is it seems to belong to the time before they were immortal, and it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. You know, there is an answer to it, but
right?
then he goes into this Piranesi like city that's just, you know, alleyways leading to nowhere and
Mm-hmm.
streets that have no end, and this is
Yeah.
where the kind of
Upside down
the madness
staircases.
of this
Mm-hmm.
mm,
Yeah, and he says
exactly, yeah.
it seemed like it was made by a god. And then he says, oh, but the gods that made it died. Um, and then he changes his mind and says, but the gods that made it were crazy. They were insane because it makes absolutely no sense. There's no
Right.
logic to it. And like you say, yeah, time seems to be distorted too. There's no sense of time. And I thought about the Library of Babel when reading this the first time, and now with the reread too. But the Library of Babel seems to have a very, it seems to be very structured. And from the beginning, Borges describes it at this place that has hexagons and they are all structured in a very specific way. And
Right.
in the Library of Babel, it seems like people, a lot of people are obsessed with the search of meaning and the search of something within that chaos. But here, it just seems that like nobody seems to be looking for anything there,
Right.
or they. It seems like they can't. And so I think he says at one point that it's so horrible that its mere existence, the very fact that it exists, is just contaminating the past and just the future and all of that. So.
Right. Yeah, it's something to it'll drive you insane. I mean, to
Mm-hmm.
try to think of a real thing like this, a problem with no solution, a
Mm-hmm.
complete just chaos. And he goes into that this kind of, well, maybe it's not right here, but when he's talking about the gods, there's a lot of referring to the gods and like the old gods or ancient gods that we don't even know
Mm-hmm.
what they are, except for that they are not like men. That's the only thing you can say about
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes even so far as to say, so long as this city endures, no one in the world could ever be happy or courageous,
Mm-hmm.
because it just is a complete destruction of
Mm-hmm.
this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Wild, wild. All right, so
Part three.
part 3. Okay. Um Okay. There's one thing I wanted to say about part just before maybe before starting part 3, just about that
Mm-hmm.
is like the dream and irrationality taking
Mm-hmm.
precedent over uh reality and even memory. Right there at the end of part 3, he's even alludes to like memory and like memories of being alive and like what order means, what order is, logic in any kind of way. That in this story, like dreams and irrationality are taking precedent, like even me, maybe that there's even more meaning to that than the fallible meanings that we kind of impart
Mm-hmm.
on things to understand them.
Yeah.
And I just kind of, I just wrote that kind of dreams and irrationality are seeming like they have more weight, more value, uh, in this big picture style of looking at it than uh, logic, or kind of
Mm-hmm.
imparting meaning
Mm-hmm.
on small things. So
Absolutely.
There's also
he
this
goes, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, it's just
Mm-hmm.
this Borges trait of always questioning the reliability of what's going on. And the character here, this is taking place in Roman times. You're talking 2,000 years ago.
Right.
We know that the manuscript is found in, what was it, 1970s? No, sorry, 1929 is when the
Right.
manuscript is purchased at the beginning. And
Right.
the character here is saying, it was so unpleasant that I swore that I would someday put it out of my mind. So you've got a character who's, 2,000 years ago, he's saying he wants to put things out of mind. And here we've got a story that's emerging in the 1920s. So what is
Right.
fiction? What is memory? What is dream?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely. That's. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So he basically, you get this kind of feeling that he's scrambling out of this city and back through the labyrinth to get back out of here. It's not a pleasant experience to be
Mm-hmm.
in this city. And he gets out the way he came in, and the immortal, or well, the old barbarian that had accompanied him is there, just kind of waiting at the opening, and he sees him writing in the sand, and he's like, well, this guy doesn't know words, uh
Mm-hmm.
has no writing, so he's writing nonsense in the sand. Maybe I'll teach him how to say his name. Maybe I'll give him a name and I'll teach him some words. And there's all these assumptions that are
Mm-hmm.
going on in the first part of part 3.
Yeah.
And he's totally uh assuming that these guys are barbarians that just can't even take care of themselves, totally uncivilized. And he says, um I resolved to teach him to recognize, perhaps even to repeat a few words. Dogs
Mm-hmm.
and horses, I reflected, are able to do the first. Many birds, like the Caesar's nightingale, can do the second. However scant a man's understanding, it will always be greater than the unreasoning beasts. So there's an assertion there that kind of asserts supremacy of reason.
Mm-hmm.
That this
A
guy is
100%.
grasping. He's grasping for something to hold on to after this horrifying um ordeal in this chaos city of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
That well, I can teach this, I can better this guy's life. I know, that he does know something, that he can impart some knowledge, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
find his bearings in the world with that kind of thing. And I think
Mm-hmm.
lends a bit to the discussion that's coming up
Mm-hmm.
um in part 4.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
he gives the guy the name of Argos,
Mm-hmm.
which, if you've read the Odyssey, is the dog, Homer's dog in the Odyssey, that's waiting for him uh during the whole time that he's away. And he talks to him, he names him, he's doing this kind of thing again for an indeterminable amount of time. And then one day something very euphoric happens. Something happens that is different, and
Mm-hmm.
he has this kind of inspiration, loves it, and goes out. It starts to rain in the desert,
Mm-hmm.
something that very, very rarely happens. And
Can I
the
say
others,
something
go ahead.
before that part? Um, I think it's before that part.
Yeah.
Can't find it right now. But a part where he says, "I thought that Argos and I um, saw the same things in the world, but we processed them differently. I can't find the line right now. And that was a big difference between him and Argos. But then it makes you think, isn't that the difference between all people, that we just take in the same information, we reword it, and mm, I don't know, we there are different combinations of things, and then those are our thoughts and all of that. So that line really made me think of that, which again ties into part 4 or 5 later on.
Yeah. Um, are you familiar with the part she's talking about, Matthew? It's the part that says, "I reflected that perhaps for him there were no objects, but rather a constant dizzying play of swift impressions. I imagined a world without memory, without time. I toyed with the possibility of a language that had no nouns, a language a language of impersonal verbs and indeclinable adjectives." And so I couldn't help but think of lawn. Ukbar,
Mm-hmm.
Orbius
Lawn
Tertius.
too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This
100%.
a never ending labyrinth of intertextuality with Borges. Really,
Mm-hmm.
it's
That's
awesome.
true. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And then so it starts raining, and this kind of thing is is even called to a little later on as well. But these kind of things are inspiration that causes them to act in a way. Um, them being who I'm about to, really reveal, because at the end of part 3, Argos, who the man that he has named Argos, starts talking in this rain. He starts crying his name, Argos. I cried Argos, and he stammers, the guy that he's named Argos, and says, Argos, Ulysses' dog, and then, without looking at me, this dog lying on the dung heap. And he, is just kind of taken aback, like, how does he know? Now he's talking. How does he know? And he asks Argos how much of the Odyssey that he knew, and he says very little. Less than the meagerest rhapsody. It has been 1,100 years since I last wrote it. So
Mm-hmm.
Argos is Homer.
Homer.
You know, the person attributed to the name Homer in our current, history.
Mm-hmm.
And through that is revealed that these barbarians here are the immortals.
Mm-hmm.
They are in the city, and then a little bit more starts making sense because, like I said, this kind of time becomes not locatable through this last part or part and a half, and then he uh revealing that they're the immortals, and they are there. Well, he's drank from that stream, so he now his idea, his perception of time, his experience of time is different now, you
Mm-hmm.
know just
Exactly.
maybe by virtue of being
Mm-hmm.
like that, where he didn't even realize it yet, because not enough time has passed for him
Mm-hmm.
to realize it, but it's happening.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And as you're reading this, or at least this happened to me, before really getting into the idea of immortality, what that brings, it's really hard to imagine how this person that wrote, who came up with the Odyssey, could then become Argos, or who the narrator calls Argos. What happened in between, and it's really hard to picture how somebody could become that. But I guess that comes with just how hard it is to imagine infinity and immortality and all of those things. But then Borges just really gets into it and gives you examples of how the years go by and all of that, and then you sort of understand everything that happens in the following parts.
Right. Yeah, well, the part 4 and that's the final part. And
Mm-hmm.
Borges, as with most of his writing, after enough setup, at the end of it, really just hits you with more than you could ever expect,
Mm-hmm.
and fills you with things to think, ponder on, and then throws you out into the abyss for you
Mm-hmm.
to continue the exploration. And this is an amazing part right here. So maybe we can just kind of go through some examples. And
So
the first
yeah.
kind of thing is that city. That city is not the original city. The immortals had destroyed it 900 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The original city, this beautiful, city. Who knows if it was beautiful at that point, but it was still legendary. They
Yeah.
had destroyed it, and then they built this city that he was wandering through on top of it. So, like you had said, this labyrinth underneath may be like part of the ancient city, Matthew. That made sense. Did have a solution to it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
then
So
what the go ahead.
before these people had, yeah, but before they've taken the elixir, life still makes sense, and then
Mm-hmm.
once they have this curse almost of immortality, then they start destroying things, which again refers
Mm-hmm.
back to the Library of Babel, doesn't it? Where the library is ordered and then people start to destroy it.
Yeah. Well, it drives people mad
Mm-hmm.
to have everything but not be able to locate it. If
Yeah.
there's infinity, then how do you locate anything? And when you have a specific thing you're looking for, well, it's in there the way you want it, or the way you want to find it. It's in there one time,
Mm-hmm.
one out of infinity. I mean, like it's just, it's enough to drive somebody crazy. And there's
Mm-hmm.
librarians killing each other, and stuff like it's wild. And these immortals, yeah, they definitely exhaust any kind of rational thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like they're going for um some kind of what is it called? What does he call it? That the city is their last symbolism, right? Something like that. They call
Mm-hmm.
the city as their last symbol. That they built it and they did that as their final kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing that they can put out there for people to see.
Right.
Um, and then they're done. They kind of go
They they
into their
realize
thoughts.
that, right, that they're doing things that they just shouldn't do things anymore. They don't see the point in it. They don't see motivation in it, and decide to, yeah, resort to just thinking all the
Right.
time.
And
And
being
that is
absorbed
what
in their
the
thoughts.
narrator sees, and he sees that, and he assumes that it's these creatures who do the opposite of that, who can't think, who can't rationalize things. So that's really interesting to see too, how he perceives that. Um, yeah.
Nice. And right, because see, Borges doesn't just say, well, they didn't see any reason for doing things
Mm-hmm.
anymore. He goes into why
Mm-hmm.
they might not want to do things anymore. Because um when it comes down to an immortal lifespan, I mean, you're going to experience everything.
Exactly.
All experiences are your experiences. And even to the point where there's no merit for anything that you might do, there's no
Mm-hmm.
merit, because before you're going to have all kinds of experiences, and then afterwards you're going to have all kinds as well. And we're just destined to experience everything. So why not really uh, kind of sublimate yourself in
Mm-hmm.
in your thoughts. So I love the quote
Yeah.
there. He says, there's nothing very remarkable about being immortal. With the exception of mankind, all creatures are immortal, for they know nothing about death. What is divine and terrible and incomprehensible is to know that oneself is immortal. And he goes into the idea that in spite of religion,
Mm-hmm.
in Jews, Christians, Muslims, the big three are called out, that people all profess in those belief systems that they believe in immortality, but that it's rather half-hearted, or
Mm-hmm.
that they don't really believe what it is that they say, because
Right.
what they're doing is placing an immortal reward for the first he calls it a century, you know, not that everybody lives 100 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that what really matters is the lifetime, the lifespan that somebody might have, and then the eternity is all hinging on this first lifespan. And he says, you know, that
Right.
doesn't really sit well with me. And I totally
Right.
resonate with that. When I
Mm-hmm.
heard that, I was like, see, that's why I resonate personally myself with Eastern religions myself as well. Because when it comes down to it, you have a lot of, you know, there's just more, and you have something that makes more sense to me. As Borges says, that it makes more
Mm-hmm.
sense. I mean, are the I think that really, I don't know if we can attribute these kind of things to the way that Borges might think. He might just really be exploring,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think that Borges was more comfortable with a cyclic cosmology like that than maybe a one and done lifetime, and then
Mm-hmm.
an eternity that hinged on um, a
Mhm.
judgment of how you were in that lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, he says the wheel of life, which is this over and over rebirth or reincarnation cycle conceived by certain religions of Hindustan, which is Islam, which is India, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
is much more plausible. So he says, you know, to him, it's more plausible. On that wheel, which is neither end nor beginning, each life is the effect of the previous life and engenderer of the next. Yet no one life determines the whole. And it's awesome to hear, you know, him kind of put it out there like that, but then draw from Western thinkers, Heraclitus, and there's another one that he calls out there to kind of um lend credence to this kind of
Mm-hmm.
looking at an immortality of man as how it really is, even though we go through cycles of birth and death. But these immortals are just stuck in one lifetime. What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. Everything.
Yeah, do everything, right? And I said it to Matthew earlier. I said, well, you know, one of the first things that I would do, or I would think I would do, is just go to a field of study and become the most learned, most, you know, high level authority of that on the face of the planet, and further research in that, and just go. I would pick something and take it through to its end, however long that might take, you know. Um, but in this, it seems like our guy has done stuff like that. You know, it does say there at one part of at the end of 4, uh,
Mm-hmm.
where he has taught astronomy to
Mm-hmm.
different peoples, and taught different literature to different peoples, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's just no, maybe that's in part 5 where he's talking about
Maybe I
uh,
was looking for it,
yeah, I've
but
taught
it is there.
astrology in Bohemia, and rewrote or wrote Sinbad the Sailor in a
Mm-hmm.
in a language that he's now forgotten, and just
Right.
disseminate knowledge, and just growing society and doing this kind of thing just because that's what you do, right? I mean,
That's
what
what you
is
can do,
else is there to do?
exactly. Yeah, but yeah, and then towards the end, he does say that because there's no merit, like we mentioned, eventually you just get tired of doing things and get tired of being everybody and at the same time nobody because you're all doing everything. Um, but yeah, that is definitely an interesting thing to think about. What would you do
Yeah,
if
there's
you
this line.
were immortal?
Go ahead.
There's this
Go ahead.
line which is very Buddhist in its nature, where he says, "No one is someone. A single immortal man is all men. And then he says, like Cornelius Agrippa, I am God, hero, philosopher, demon, and world, which is a long-winded way of saying I am not.
Right.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Immortality renders everything futile and
right.
Exactly. And I'm not sure if this is part 4 or 5 anymore, but he does say it was impossible for somebody to not have come up with the Odyssey because given enough time, humanity, like somebody in humanity, would have eventually written the Odyssey. So if we think of humans living infinitely, then yes, like you said, Matthew, one immortal man could be all men in that sense. And that's also an idea that Borges explores in our stories too, that we always bring up, how two people who are going through the same experience are the same person in that moment that they're going through it. So one immortal man going through all the experiences in the world is every single man who has gone through them too.
Right.
So,
Very cool. I'm reminded about and it is a very Buddhist idea of that the nothing, and it has analog to Hermetics, Kabbalah, where there's like the infinite, and then there's infinite light, but then there's also infinite nothingness, and that nothing is not nothing, and in Buddhism, nothing is not nothing. Nothing is infinite potential. It's just a field of potentiality. And so there's that analog there where I think that anybody, and what Borges is calling to with this is that if you are in touch with infinity, that there is that nothing in an infinite mind state, of infinite perspective or frame of reference, maybe, is synonymous with everything. Nothing and everything, is the same thing, like two sides of the same coin. Manifest and unmanifest, potential and actual. These kind of things, they don't really make any difference because whatever is potential will become actual eventually. And from an eternal, infinite point of view, it's there, it's there, and it's all not there. And to be able to see from that, it's an anti-dualistic uh way of looking at things, which is just hard to wrap your head around anyways, right? It's hard enough to talk about, much less wrap your head around. But Borges, right? There we go. So there is, among the corollaries of the doctrine, which is the doctrine of the immortals, there is no thing that is not counterbalanced by another. And that's what we're talking about, like this kind of, there's no one thing. There is always in time this kind of dualism, but the dualism ultimately dissolves in a one, a harmonious, homogeneous, thing, a whole or something. But there's this idea. There is one that has little theoretical importance, but that has caused us, the immortals, at the beginning or the end of the 10th century to scatter over the face of the earth. It may be summarized in these words: there is a river whose waters give immortality. Somewhere there must be another river whose waters take it away. And the number of rivers are not infinite. So these immortals with infinite lifespan have the time to find it, and if they go, they're gonna find it. So they strike out. They strike out over the whole earth to try to find the cure for immortality, right?
Exactly. And in a sort of search for meaning. So with that mortality, hoping to find some meaning in their lives. And it really reminds me of the Library of Babel, when everyone's searching for that one book that will explain what every other book says, or something like that, some sort of catalog for every book in the library.
Right.
So it's just, yeah, just trying to find a needle in a haystack, essentially.
Right. Yeah, I love that, and there is a lot of Library of Babel in this, because that is just it's such a wonderful exploration of infinity. That story,
Yeah,
it really
absolutely.
gets you.
Hmm.
So he strikes out. That's
The
when we
story
have.
also,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this story also lines up nicely with his story Shakespeare's Memory, and
We haven't read that yet.
this thing that he
We haven't
returns
read it
to
yet.
of okay, this idea of something that you would think is a blessing but ends up being a curse. It's a tradition that he seems to return to several times. Yeah, so the protagonist or the hero sets out to find something that they think is going to be a positive force, and then they have to try and get rid of it because they've welcomed something dark into their life.
Yeah.
There's another story. I think it's called, I read it just the other week as part of the Library of Babel series. I think it's called Blue Tigers, and again, this is very similar. A sort of a British explorer goes in search of these blue tigers, and what he finds in his search of the tiger ends up being a curse, and he has to try and get rid of it. And he needs to find a way to give it away to somebody else, which is the same thing we see in a variety of his stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of the Sahir, the Aleph in some way, just trying to forget once you know too much and all of
Yeah.
that, which he plays with. But those are great examples.
Yeah.
I
This hearing, like,
will have to read
coming
those.
into a vision of the divine, or vision of God, or whatever it might be, fill in the blank, but an infinity, and then it becoming a completely obsessive thing that destroys your life, destroys your mind.
Yeah, and what happened with the Aleph was that the Borges, the narrator Borges, also felt like there was nothing new, just like the immortals in the story feel like everything will be done, so there is no point in doing it and all of that. So with forgetting, and in this case with being mortal, that is sort of solved, that issue that they have.
Nice. I love the end of this thing, and it really is that kind of a happy ending for Borges, right? Because our man does find the cure for immortality. He drinks from a river or a spring in Bombay, off of Bombay. He says he's outside the city, and he sees a spring, and tastes the clear water by habit. I mean, maybe he's been doing this for 1,000 years, going and just drinking from every open water source, fresh water source that he ever comes by. And he, as I scaled the deep bank beside it, a thorny tree scratched the back of my hand. The unaccustomed pain seemed exceedingly sharp. Incredulous, speechless, and in joy, I contemplated the precious formation of a slow drop of blood. And so there's another experience, like the rain, where it's something that's unexpected, and gives pause to this immortal person who has seen it all, and nothing is new, nothing can surprise. Well, there still is these things, there still is that, and it never has been really exhausted. The exhausting of that is an idea that is being worked through, but it hasn't been done. There's not ever that getting to that kind of point. So he says, I'm mortal again. I'm just like every other person. I'm just like every other person. And then that's it. He's back in a mortal body, and he knows that death will, set him free at some point, right?
Mhm.
And he's happy about it.
Yeah.
And then we go through I mean, it just completely changes what this story is trying to do. It seems as if we have this kind of that here's where the text itself, that is this found manuscript, is kind of critiquing literature and stories itself. Is that right? Am I off on that? Because it's just this kind of thing where I
Yeah,
didn't really know what he's trying to do with that. Go ahead.
I think Matthew was trying to say something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this critic is alleging, or is claiming, that the manuscript is clearly apocryphal because there's too many literary references to thieved from other texts. But whoever has put this postscript on doesn't agree with that.
Mhm.
But of course, what the narrator has said in the story is that with immortality you can imbibe all of these things, and you start to lose sense of who you even are. So, but I thought the last line almost went back to, you mentioned earlier, the Kabbalah and these mystical writings, and we end with him saying, words, 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 taken out of place and mutilated, words from other men. Those were the alms left by the hours and the centuries. This idea of everything then being
Yeah.
the word, and that there's only the word.
Right. In the
Mhm.
beginning there was the word, and in the end
Mhm.
there's only going to be the word. Right.
Mhm.
Nice. That's very cool. I loved it. I loved the end of this whole uh
Mhm.
part 5, that is just this where it's talking about all the different literary references and things, and our writer, our former immortal, says it's not so strange that time may have confused those once portrayed me with those who were symbols from the fate of the person that accompanied me for so many centuries, and that is Homer, I guess, right?
Mhm.
I have been Homer. Soon, like Ulysses, I shall be nobody. Soon
Mhm.
I shall be all men. I shall be dead.
Mhm.
So I just love that because it really drives home. Borges is so good at like just exploring something and then succinctly one line giving it to you really really hard, you know?
Mhm.
And
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
yeah, and
Mhm.
that's it right there. That's what he's kind of driving home, and there's a literary reference in that, you
Mhm.
know?
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, like Ulysses, I shall be nobody. And it's like, man, you don't write that without, really, really knowing the texts and
Mhm.
stories, and there's a love. There's just a love imbibed in all of Borges' stuff, a love for stories. And like Didion said, that, like stories are, you know, what we do, how we live by stories. We
Mhm.
live by our stories.
Mhm.
Um, we don't live by facts. You know what I mean? We live by the stories that we tell ourselves, um, from the facts, from our experiences, and that is our life. And I think us as readers, all the readers that watch, and definitely the ones sitting here, that kind of thing is a joy to hear because we feel it. We live that kind of thing. That's why we love
Mhm.
stories. That's why we love literature. And Borges was, an epitome of the kind of just the our kind of guy. What I wouldn't give to sit down and have a conversation with Borges, right?
Oh yeah, me too.
Probably just ask a few questions and then sit back and
I think
Listen, he could talk for
I
days. I watched interviews too, and Sorry.
Yes. Go ahead.
I recently read an interview with him. He was interviewed by Christopher Hitchens.
Really?
I
which is
didn't
quite
see
a
that.
meeting. Yeah, Christopher and Hitchens stayed with Borges for a couple of days in Buenos Aires, and he, in the article, he just talks about Borges wanted him to read to him, and all the usual sort of Borgesian topics come up. But I think it was during that interview that he said to Hitchens that he talks about infinity and language, and how, you know, we're all speaking ancient tongues, and that every time we speak and every time we use language, our ancestors are alive in our very words, because we're all using these language is part of this big chain, which I guess there's a beauty to that and a comfort to that, but there's also this there can be a dark side to it as well, where you think, is literature just futile because we're all within this big sea of this almost infinite sea of language.
Right.
So
like there's nothing new.
that's another
Like,
question.
yeah.
I think he's yeah.
Absolutely, especially with that quote at the beginning. I don't know if you read it at the beginning, Noah.
I didn't read it. I didn't read it.
Mhm.
But go ahead. It's
Okay.
great to have it at the end.
It is, yeah. So thankfully I have it in English too.
Sure.
Solomon said, "There is no new thing upon the earth, so that as Plato had an imagination, that all knowledge was but remembrance. So Solomon giveth his sentence, that all novelty is but oblivion." So, like you were saying, Matthew, if what we're doing is basically repeating things and finding new ways of combining those old ideas, that old information, coming up with new things. I mentioned how he said that Argos, who was himself, saw the same things in the world, but he combined things differently, and that's how he came up with a different version of the world. That's what we all do, and we all have these same things. There's nothing new, but there is a ignorance, so not knowing so many things, so you think that you're finding out things that are new, but they're just new to you. And there's also forgetting. So we also talked about the Aleph and how once you've seen it all, you either try to deal with knowing that there's nothing new again, or you try to forget so that you find newness again, which is just forgetting. But yeah, I think that is the big message that he's getting at with this.
Yes. Very good. Very, very
Well,
good.
I think that Borges is. I think that his own personal take on it was more on the positive side of things. It may be in the same episode,
I think so
or
too.
sorry, the same interview. He says, you know, he learned Anglo-Saxon after he went blind, and he says in this interview, I'm speaking these Anglo-Saxon poems, and they're all written by anonymous. I don't know who wrote the poem, but he said that doesn't matter. What matters is that if I speak the words, I'm bringing back to life that poet who stood on a beach in, you know, 9th century England. So
yeah, and to
I think
think
he
that
leaned on the
sorry,
Very
continue.
cool.
no,
I
sorry,
love
go
it.
ahead.
I love
Yeah.
this exploration, and I think that when it comes down to it, I can say, you know, just from my own feeling towards what Borges gets at is that it is a more it is a positive take on that kind of thing, because see, these are explorations, and I think that at the fundamental root of it for us who are not immortal physically in this in this lifetime, and are you know, we we wrestle with these ideas, and it's great to you know, grow and flex consciousnesses by going into it. But the point is not to be kind of overwhelmed by it, but to see it as like an impetus to act, an impetus to create, and to say, yeah, well, there is something more to go. Borges didn't stop. Borges was not, you know, overwhelmed by any of these ideas and saying, oh well, this is just it's taking any kind of pessimistic road or any kind of negative alleyway off of it. It's all for the betterment of what we can do as human beings. What can we bring to the table? And I think that Borges also respects the individual in that way. That there's somebody that can come along and bring something brand new that will kind of deepen understanding, even though we could talk for a long time about how valuable that might be in the grand scheme of things, but it's just a endless spiraling almost out of control kind of thing. It's so good, huh? Awesome. Another one down. Anybody got anything else?
No.
Another one down. The Immortals by Borges. What an amazing story. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Yasmin, as always.
Thank you for having me.
Catch you on the next one, BookTube. Bye-bye.